Good evening, members of the Council. I call on my chaplain to lead us in prayer.
So let's begin us putting aside the busyness of the day. We acknowledge that Christians await the return of their God. We pray for all Christians marking Advent. And we pray for Christ to come and for the world to be remade. And let's individually place ourselves at the service of those we represent before God. Let's remember the world from which we come. We pray for the peoples all around the world afflicted by man-made and natural disasters. We pray for peace between the leaders of the world, between peoples of different ethnicities, race or religion. We pray for peace and justice in our world. And let's remember all those we know in special need of our prayers today. People we know who are sick in mind, body or spirit, and those who mourn. Almighty God, the fountain of all goodness, bless our Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth and all who are in authority under her, that they may order all things in wisdom and equity, righteousness and peace, to the honour of your name and the good of your people. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Lord God, help us to make and keep Dudley Borough a home for all its peoples, recognising their different faiths and experiences. Grant to our mayor and representatives integrity to act with justice and compassion, that they may grow among us harmony and peace. Amen. I'd like to invite you to join with me in the words of the Lord's Prayer, using the traditional form. So we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. I do wish you a very good evening and a good council meeting. And I see you at our carol service on Thursday. Good night. God bless. Please.
Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillors Bill Etheridge, Serena Craigie, Karen Jordan and Nick Gregory. Are there any further apologies for absence? Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct concerning the business to be considered at this extraordinary meeting? Any declarations are then received. Are there any? Honorary Freeman. I call on the leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'll keep these short and brief. I think the appropriate time for long speeches and tributes to the two nominees can be made at a much later time if Council agrees tonight. So I will read out the proposed resolution. Number 1, that pursuant to Section 249 of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the criteria adopted by the Council on the 25th of February 2013, this Council hereby appoints Roy Richardson as an honorary freeman of the Borough. And secondly, that pursuant to Section 249 of the Local Government Act 1972, this Council, being mindful of its association with RAF Cosford, hereby confers on RAF Cosford freedom of entry into the Metropolitan Borough of Dudley on all ceremonial occasions with bayonets fixed, drums beating and bands playing. And finally, Mr. Mayor, number 3, that the Chief Executive be authorised to make the necessary arrangements for the presentation ceremony. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Does any other member wish to speak on this item, bearing in mind the opening comments?
I've got nobody.
No one? I'll call on the leader to reply. Thank you. Is that all agreed? That is carried. That concludes the business for the extraordinary meeting. We will now proceed to the agenda for the ordinary council meeting. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors Bill Etheridge, Serena Craigie, Catherine Gordon, Nick Gregory. Expressed under the Members' Code of Conduct concerning the business to be considered at this meeting, having been distributed around the council chamber. Interest previously disclosed by members at the meetings are recorded in the minutes of the White Book. All of these interests will be taken as read, and they are deemed as repeated at this council meeting. I now invite members to declare any additional interests. None? Moving on to the minutes, I move that the minutes of the meetings held on the 9th of October be confirmed as a correct record and signed. Does the council agree? That is carried. Mayor's announcements. Firstly, can I thank Kath Smith and everyone involved with Voicebox Productions for the excellent performance they gave to members of the council before this meeting. The performance has given us all a much greater understanding of what the group is all about and the outstanding work they are doing. Can we please give them a round of applause? It now gives me great pleasure to announce that the employees in Street and Green Care have won a national award from the Countryside Management Association in respect of Saltwell's local nature reserve. Councillor Shakespeare to...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Countryside Management Association's Gordon Miller Award is their annual award for the most deserving project, initiative or innovative practice that has made or is making an outstanding contribution to countryside urban green space management. It is voted on by those present at the annual national conference, which this year included participants from Europark Federation and European Ranger Federation, as well as professionals from right across the UK. Dudley's Countryside Service beat off competition from the National Trust this year to win this award for the restoration of an area of internationally important geology at Saltwell's Nature Reserve with and for the local community. The project won by demonstrating how long-term vision focused the limited council resources available to transform an area using volunteers and external funding. The work was carried out by our wonderful Countryside Service staff and site volunteers, including those from a drug and alcohol rehabilitation therapy, pupils from a special school, local companies and geologists. This has transformed 2 nationally protected geological sites, restored a hectare of wildlife-rich habitat and created a new interpretational trail which includes stunning sculptures to bring this community heritage asset to life. It's taken a challenging part of the site to maintain and turned it into the most delightful and educational afternoon out for people of all ages to celebrate this important area right in the middle of Dudley Borough. Well done to everyone involved. I am so proud of you all, and I hope this beautiful award takes pride of place in one of our council offices. I have heard that Matt Williams at Lister Road is your preferred location, so if anyone would like to see it close up, please visit Matt. Well done again to Alan Priest, our Senior Warden at Saltwells, Tom Weaver, Emma Woolley and everyone involved in achieving this magnificent award. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And if I can lift it, I'll ask the representatives of the team to come forward to receive their award, please. Great sadness that I have to report on the recent death of former councillor Pat Martin. Pat served in North Bedfordshire Borough Council from 1974 to 1983, and in 2000 she was elected to Dudley Council, where she served as a councillor representing Amblecote until her retirement in 2015. Pat was mayor of the borough from 2009-10, having been deputy mayor in the previous year. She also served on the Cabinet and Executive as the lead member for Personnel, Legal and Property, as well as holding numerous other key committee memberships during her period of local government service. She was made an Honorary Alderman of Dudley in 2015. Can I please ask the Council to observe a period of silence as a token of our respect to the memory of Pat Martin? Thank you. Are there any members who wish to pay tribute to Pat?
Mr Mayor, former councillor Pat Martin was indeed an excellent ward member. She represented that ward for a full 15 years, and she did it with a lot of hard work, but also, as I'm sure a lot of members will allude to tonight, also a great sense of humour. She took on the role of mayor, as you say, in 2009-10 with great dignity. She brought a lot to that role, but she also brought fun to it. And those members that attended her annual Mayor's Ball at Himley Hall, I think she's the only mayor I've known in 14 years being here that's had a gangsters and moles reception, or whatever you want to call it. So she was someone who, great lady, great councillor, but someone who also had a fantastic sense of humour. And it is fitting that when she finally stood down after 15 years, we gave her that honour. And again, another first, because she was the first female recipient of Honorary Alderman. And I know that she was immensely proud of that fact. Away from the personal side of Pat Martin, there was the professional side, the role that she took on for quite a long time as Cabinet Member for Personnel, Legal and Property, as it was in those days. And I think a testament to how good a member has been on this authority is when, years after you've finished in that role, officers of this council are still singing your praises. And I'm looking up and he's not there. I'm sure he'll forgive me. But Gordon Gibbs still talks about the way Pat handled herself and the negotiations on the single status and equal pay. And he still alludes to the fact today that the relationships between the then Conservative-controlled administration and the trade unions was an extremely good relationship, and a lot of that is testament to the way former councillor Pat Martin conducted herself. Yeah. She'll be greatly missed, but at least now she is reunited with Bill. Pat and Bill attended many functions organised by this side of the chamber. In fact, Pat organised most of them during her time on the council, but at least now they're reunited. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What do we really say about Pat Martin? Pat Martin basically was an exceptional member of this chamber. She was basically an important member of this party, and she arranged so many functions for this party and took it forward. She always arranged our annual meeting every year down Stourbridge Golf Club, and she carried out in her own professional way. Pat was a professional. As far as this chamber was concerned, our Pat was respected by all members of this party, and the parties opposite as well. She helped everyone, irrespective, to be honest with you. But Pat was outstanding because a background in education really put her forward to that. She was, from my point of view, one of the members of basically the cabinet that took this party and this council from a 2-star rating authority with little chance of improvement to a 4-star rating authority. And I think that reflects on Pat very well, to be honest with you. She will be sadly missed, Mr Mayor, and I thank everyone actually who said anything about her. Thank you.
Councillor Kettle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to throw a little light on Pat that we haven't heard about tonight. And she's a lovely character. And I first met her in Norton. We were leafleting in Norton, and this lady turned up, bronzed, athletic, and apparently a very good tennis player. And her years in Spain had not only honed her language abilities, but she was a very sporty lady. And it's hard to imagine in later years this bronze athletic lady turning up on a weeknight in Norton. But she's always cheerful, as I say, athletic. And her and Bill have took an active part in our party, socially and politically, for nigh on 30 years now. But I have really, having known her so many years, an insight to how experienced she was and how industrious she was. She was a hard-working lady in many ways, and very few people have ever said a bad word about Pat. And that's a good thing in life, that nobody ever turns the knife on you, sort of business in politics. And she was well thought after. She should be missed, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Peterlow.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I must make the comment that far be it from certain absent councillors tonight, I think the council meeting is an absolute fitting arena for us to be paying respects to councillors that have passed away, and no more fitting tribute can be passed than Pat Martin, who will be looking down upon us and what we're saying within this council chamber this evening, because the Pat Martin that I know was political through and through. I remember from the year 2000, my first ever election campaign was fighting Pat in Amblecote, and very significantly losing to Pat in Amblecote. I remember she was the first blue rinse Tory that I came across, and she was the very essence of what I have passed through to my children, of what a Conservative politician is. She looked like a politician of the Conservative Party, and she acted like one as well. In fact, I would go as far to say, Mr Mayor, that I think Councillor Martin is probably the first politician in this chamber who I can honestly say I never agreed with a political view that she had, yet found it impossible to dislike. At home, last Christmas, my children brought me a T-shirt. And that T-shirt has got a simple phrase written on it, which is, "Never kissed a Tory." Now, Pat Martin is the reason I will never be able to wear that T-shirt. And I'm sure that each and every person in this chamber has one time or another received the Pat Martin smacker. Some of us probably haven't asked for it, certainly not at the time that she wanted to. She referred to me, as I'm sure she's referred to 71 others, as their favourite councillor. And myself and Pat developed actually quite a close personal relationship, albeit never agreeing on any political matter. The leader raised a really important point. Pat will be forever remembered by the trade unions of this council as a firm but fair politician, someone who could have the political debate but then actually leave and share a cup of coffee or a few words. And I say this to each and every one of, if any of us, when we leave this council chamber, could end up with the tribute of saying, I disagreed fundamentally with that individual's point of view, but I absolutely respect that person. Well, that person was simply Pat Martin. She will be a tremendous loss, I know, to the Conservative Party. I know the care that she had between, and the love between herself and Bill. I know the difficulties I caught up with her just around a year ago now, and I've kept in touch via Liz Walker and Fraser McNamara over the last 3 or 4 months. So I know the challenges in the latter part of the life. Pat Martin is the very essence of whether you're red, blue, or even indigo, of what makes a good local politician. She'll be sorely missed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hilary Bills, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was never on a committee with Pat Martin, and I didn't know her professionally either. But I remember her because she introduced to my life the Pat Martin 5-second rule. When Danella Russell and I were elected, we dutifully came to all our training, and the first time we had one, Pat was the visual aid. Here is a councillor, listen to what she has to say and ask her questions. And she was very entertaining, she was very generous, and it was an excellent meeting. But at the end she said, I've got my last piece of information for you. So we all, oh, right, she said, before you ever send an email or go into social media, stop. Just stop and give yourself 5 seconds. Is what you're saying accurate? Have you checked your spelling? And also, are you replying all, or are you just replying to the person you wanted to reply to? And if it goes into social media, remember, it'll be there forever. I can assure you that was the best lesson I learnt in my training. And I put it down. To this day, I call it the Pat Martin rule. And anybody who joins the council, I do share with them. Now, I can see some smiles over there. She did tell me the reason why she came up with that rule. I think she herself broke the rule and replied all when she didn't mean to. But, hey, she was human after all. I pay my respects to her, Mr. Mayor, and she will sorely be missed.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After that, there's not really much left to say. It's a similar situation we found ourselves in a few weeks ago, isn't it, Mr. Mayor? But all that I can say is Pat Martin was a true lady in every respect. And I actually christened her Lady Amblecote, and then she remained as Lady Amblecote. But coming back to the remarks made by Councillor Lowe, as Councillor Lowe, there was a good special relationship with Councillor Martin and former Councillor John Simpson. And I thought that was a good relationship to have across the chamber, because it showed that unity, the working together, and that's the type of lady she was. There's no question about using the word lady. She was a lady. I used to attend her strawberry afternoon teas on a Sunday afternoon, and she couldn't look after her enough. She was absolutely brilliant and things like that. But, Mr Mayor, I do have a small request and a little statement to make. When she lost her beloved Bill some years ago, he was a former serving officer with the Bedford Constabulary. And in Bedford, they actually flew the flags at half-mast at the day of the funeral. Would it be possible to have the flag flying at half-mast in memory of Councillor Martin on the day of the funeral, please?
That's something I'll ask about, obviously. Councillor Crumpton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was thinking that I'm glad there's a bit of a gap between myself and Pete Lowe, because I had to think back and I thought to myself, I thought I was the only one she'd kissed. But obviously I wasn't. And I just wanted to say that when I first came into this council, that's quite a few years ago now, I remember meeting Pat in the hallway at the front, and the welcoming smile that she gave me, even though I was from the Labour Party, she told me, it didn't really matter, because I looked like a nice young man. And I thought, oh dear, that might not be the way I come over in a bit. But, you know, what I'd like to say about Pat is that she really is the essence of somebody you would want as a friend. Even though she had that different politics, the way she looked after me in that first year, because I think she was on some committee that I was on at the time, it really stuck with me all the time. And when we used to go for the Remembrance Day march in Stourbridge Park, she'd hold my arm sometimes as we were going up there. And just, she'd actually remember that first couple of days, because you do feel lost when you come here, don't you, at first? You don't quite know what's going to be expected of you, and she really made me welcome. And what Councillor Stanley just said about John Simpson, the friend of him, John, for me, because that's who I sort of took over from within our ward, you know, he was the same sort of person, you know, completely political, but actually a very decent soul. And that's how I remember Pat. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I would be hard pushed to say more than Councillor Lowe already has. It was a very nice tribute. Thank you very much, Pete. Pat Martin was a friend of mine. When I first came on the council, she was already a cabinet member. She took me under her wing and she showed me a lot of the ways it works. She was also our group whip. And if you came foul of Pat Martin, you really knew you were in trouble, because she wouldn't hold back at you. And as Pete said, she was really political. She didn't show it, but she was. She blew every time we had a voting day, she dyed her hair blue for that very reason. A true blue, as you said. But there are things that perhaps are not quite so well known about Pat. I think I was off the council at the time, and she might have been mayor, and we were in the Cornbow Centre in Howells Owen. And there was a big crowd of people, and Pat was there, not as a mayor, she was just visiting, and I happened to bump into her. And she asked me what was going on. And all of a sudden, screams went out from everywhere, and the Ninja Turtles ran past us. Pat had not got a clue who they were and wanted to know, who are these people, David? Who are these people? That was Pat. She was strictly down the line. When I was doing the Lye Carnival one year, she was the mayor that year, and she turned up with Bill, and she went round every single stall and spoke to everybody, especially the showman. And she took part in the welly wanging in a full regalia, chains on, and she actually broke the world record for a female welly wanker. And she held that, and she was very proud of that. She kept telling people and showing them the picture of her doing it. Pat was an exceptional person, very friendly, very funny. She greeted all men with a kiss, all of us. She was a bit of a minx that way, I think. But she was a lovely woman, and I shall miss her greatly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Cottrell.
Martin. Pat once told me that I was her favourite Labour councillor. and I felt quite chuffed about this. and then I caught her kissing George Davis, and I told her she was a true timing madam.
Thank you very much. It's time to come clean. I've also kissed Pat Martin. Several times, but it's always been in public. But just to put you into context, when I checked to see what had been charities in past years, I wasn't surprised to see that Pat Martin also chose mental health, Mind. And I was very proud to choose Mind this year and follow in her footsteps. A great ambassador for mental health, and I'm pleased to be following in her footsteps. Thank you. I'm sorry, there are a few public announcements. The Civic Carol service will be on Thursday, the 7th of December at St Mary's Church, the village, Kings Wimford. We look forward to seeing everyone there. A charity tea and coffee morning will be held in the Mayor's Parlour on the 8th of December from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m, and everyone is welcome to join us. The Christmas light switch on in Brierley Hill will be on Saturday, the 9th of December. Entertainment will be taking place in the town centre throughout the day. The Mayor's Winter Walk, a 7-mile walk, is being arranged for the 28th of January 2018 from the Bonded Warehouse in Stourbridge. That is growing in stature and promises to be bigger and better as the years go on. As members will know, our Strategic Director for People, Tony Oakman, is leaving Dudley to take up the role of Chief Executive of Bolton Council. Tony joined Dudley in March 2015, and he has overseen the transformation of children and adult services and worked to develop an even closer ties with partner organisations and community groups across the borough. Tony has made a tremendous contribution in his time with us in Dudley, and on behalf of the Council, I wish him all the very best in his new role. Thank you, Tony. Do any members wish to speak on Tony's departure? Councillor Harley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'll keep it brief. The one thing that sums up Tony Oakman's contribution to this authority since his appointment is the fact that when he came here, Children's Services was on its knees. He now leaves with Children's Services in a much, much better place. Yep. And he's done that by convincing and getting 3 political groups to put aside their differences on Children's Services and work together. And there are not many officers at whatever seniority there is that can achieve that. And he's done it with a great degree of skill and diplomacy. And he got the previous Cabinet member, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Vickers, who at the time was our shadow member for Children's Services, and Councillor Brothwood, to sit in the same room and actually work together to try and bring Children's Services up to the good standard and the level that it is now. And I think that's the greatest tribute we can pay him, because not many people could have done that and got people to put aside their differences and work together for the good of the children of this borough. But we're sorry to see him go, but we do wish him well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say it's been a great pleasure working with Tony over the last 18 months, especially when I became Chair of Scrutiny, which is a pretty big step up, having been fairly new to the Council, but he gave me great support. He always encouraged me to challenge, and despite crossing swords a few times with him, I think we kept a very healthy working relationship and delivered good scrutiny. Children's Services has moved a long way forward under his watch, and Tony deserves his new appointment. And I think Bolton's gain is definitely Dudley's loss. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Crumpton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Tony personally. He was very, very supportive to me in that last few months when I was doing Children's Services. But I want to just bring out one particular aspect of it. We had a recruitment meeting, an appointments board that was put together to find the rank below where he was, what I would have called in the old days the Children's Services Director, but it wasn't. And it was very difficult to get anybody into this position. We held that recruitment board that day, and a number of people came before us. And at the end of that meeting, we decided we'd actually appoint somebody. And then I went back and talked to Tony. And I said, we can't appoint that person. And we were left in the terrible position then of coming. We actually had a council meeting, I think, arranged to rubber stamp it through. And what happened then was that myself and Tony were sort of told, well, you've got to go and find somebody then. And the help that he gave me to understand that sometimes it's not about the cost of the person that you employ, but the actual attributes of the person that you employ. Because for me, I've been a trade unionist all my life. Consultants have been like the anathema for me. But we took on Merlin between myself and Tony. It still had to go through all the sort of council rigmarole. But he helped me tremendously to understand the type of person we needed to come into children's services to then take us through over that next 18 months. And I, for one, feel that Tony has been an excellent servant to this council. When we first met him, to be quite honest, I knew that he was the person that we wanted for the job that he took on. And I do believe that he will be extremely difficult to replace, because actually, I don't think there are many people about like Tony anymore with the breadth of knowledge that he's got. And I wish everybody well in getting a new appointment and those people that are left in their place to do this. But I truly think that we will miss Tony an awful lot. Thank you, Tony.
Councillor Lowe.
I really didn't expect that to go off. I do apologise. That's my Christmas red nose in my pocket, which is probably fitting to get up and say goodbye to Tony Oakman. I was actually chair of the appointments committee, where we selected Tony. So I can take a certain amount of credit as being on that chairing meeting. Just for everybody's notice, if it's a bad appointment, then it's collective responsibility. But I think everybody who was on that appointments committee on the day, we're not breaching any confidence at this point. It was a unanimous decision. And I think each and every one of us on that appointments committee made the comment that this is a chief executive in waiting, and we need to hold on and use that expertise for as long as we can and be part of that journey. Now, I think we all recognised that it was going to be a journey, because people like Tony Oakman don't come across every day. And we recognised the fact that what we needed, and I think it was all three parties, somebody who we didn't need to develop over a 6 or 7 month programme, who could hit the ground running from day one and bring forth the significant changes to address the challenges that we as an authority faced. Now, Tony Oakman actually didn't wait for day one. I remember calling him actually from outside the council steps to pass on the news that he'd been appointed. And firstly, he was very grateful, but importantly, he'd already done the background on what Dudley Council was. He already knew the challenges. Not only at interview did he make that clear, he made that very clear from the first day that he came. I also knew, because there was a significant issue on travelling, he actually took a caravan for a significant amount of time. And there seems to be this thing with senior officers at the moment to have microwaved meals, what they keep in the fridge, and go back either to hotel rooms or temporary accommodation. But Tony put the shifts in, and he put the hours in, and he put those political discussions in place to ensure that we move forward. Now, let's just think of those political discussions. Because let's be honest, children's service had been a political football. And we've all got to take some responsibility for the way that had been used. Those discussions still took place, but they took place in the respect of a closed room where we could actually find those collective way forward. That was leadership that addressed that, and for that we've got to be eternally grateful. So, in summary, in March 2015, we knew that we would be doing this at some point in the not too distant future. We knew, every councillor on that committee that Tony Oakman was the chief executive in waiting. I think, as Patrick said and as Tim said, our loss is most certainly Bolton's gain. What I do hope is he takes some of the Black Country mannerisms with him. It's a Boston place in Dudley. Bolton may not be quite so Boston, especially when they're playing First Division football in a few months' time. We've got to make the most of officers like this who do a thankless task. And I think each and every one of us should be grateful that we've had the opportunity to work with Tony, who certainly left the areas of his responsibility significantly better than when he first came.
Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everybody else has summed up really what I think of Tony. I think Tony has been an excellent director of people services for children and also for adult services. The transformation work that has been taking place over the last few years with Tony at the helm and with his colleagues underneath has been exemplary, and I think it puts Dudley on the map for the right reasons, supporting our vulnerable people, whether they're young or old. As has been echoed, I think it is certainly our loss, it is Lancashire's gain, and certainly Tony is doing his homework on Lancashire, because my timeline on Twitter is been full of things like Peter Kay and such like, so good on you, Tony. We wish you all the very best, and thank you very much for all the support that you have given me during my time in this position. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors often talk about how cross-party councillors welcome new councillors when they're first elected. As a 20-year-old, that was always very nice, but also to have the support of one of the lead officers to encourage me to scrutinise. His office door was always open when I had questions, and the support he's given me has really made sure that I knew what I was doing, and I'll always be grateful for that. He's done a fantastic job. He'll definitely be missed, and I wish you all the best.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's all been said, really. Tony, it's not too late, you know. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. What we haven't mentioned tonight particularly is actually the children and young people of Dudley, and the most vulnerable in society, the most vulnerable adults, the most vulnerable children. That's really what we're talking about. Those were the people that, you know, prior to Tony's arrival, we weren't quite getting right. We were letting them down. And Tony, I think the greatest compliment, and I think the gratitude of everybody within this chamber, and I also believe the gratitude, you know, the people of Dudley owe you a debt of gratitude as well, is that you leave children, young people, safer, more secure, and I believe happier than when you arrived. And we are all very grateful for that. Thank you.
Councillor Zoda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I obviously want to congratulate Tony on his appointment as Chief Executive. I spent some 12 months with Tony. I can't say that we always agreed, but what I can say is that the discussions were robust. He shared his view of the world and I shared mine, and in the end we came to a compromise. What I have noticed with Tony is his sheer commitment and desire to do the right thing for the people of Dudley. And I bet you he will take that to Bolton. And that's why I think for the people of Bolton, somebody like Tony will be exactly what's required to do the right thing. Adult social care services is in a better state now than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. The partnerships that we have got with organisations like public health, like the hospitals, like mental health, and beyond are a testimony to the work that Tony has done. His work on the Health and Wellbeing Board and the way that he has influenced the agenda on that board is a testament to the character of Tony Oakman. I certainly will miss him. I know that his team will miss him because a number of them have spoken to me and they are quite concerned about what this will mean going forward. I think he's a fantastic chief executive in waiting. He'll do a fantastic job over in Bolton. He's done an excellent job for us. I'm very grateful for the time that he's given to me and the politics that we have enjoyed together. Thank you.
Thank you, members. I'd just like to reiterate all of that and add my congratulations, Tony. Took an instant liking to the man as soon as he walked through the door. And I think the people of Dudley owe you a great debt of gratitude. And the only thing we'll say is the highest praise you can get from a black countryman is he's a Boston bloke. So. And finally, I know somebody's coming back afterwards. Finally, all members and officers are invited to join me in the Mayor's Parlour and the Mayoress in the Mayor's Parlour for refreshments following this meeting. Please. There's loads of stuff down there. Thank you. Now, reports and recommendations. Capital Programme monitoring. I call upon the leader.
Of the Council, I move that the report and recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Any debates? Councillor Ali.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to speak on Lister Road development on Appendix A, page 5. I have spoken on this in the previous council meetings, and I don't think the message seems to have got across either to the leader or the cabinet member. We have here that an outcome will be expected in 2018. The work is to begin on site, and we've had meetings, with Alan Lunt, who's the strategic director. That's myself, ward councillor, my ward colleagues, as well as Ian Austin, the MP. And we were told the application is on hold. Now, from this report, it doesn't look like anything is on hold. And I think we're being misled by the leader and the cabinet member on this. If it's on hold, then it shouldn't be in this report here. And also the impact on local people and residents in St Thomas's on Lister Road is going to be massive, with 500 or 700 staff being placed on Lister Road. I think the impact in terms of health impact assessments, health impact on the local people, the traffic, the noise, the pollution, is just too much. What we're saying is those 500 members of staff should be placed in the town centre to breathe life into the town. This is where those staff are needed, not on Lister Road. Lister Road is already over to develop. And also, I think, linked with this, and I don't know what the Tory administration has got in for people of St Thomas's, as well as this, we pick up in the Express and Star, travellers camp shortlist locations to spark anger. This was the headline in the Express and Star. Blows Green being another kind of site on the shortlist, and it's unacceptable. The members elected, we don't even know about it. And here, Councillor Harley and his cabinet member go to, to some extent putting this in the paper. And I think they need to come and be clear in terms of what they mean. And the people of St Thomas's don't deserve this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to comment on that. As I said at the last council meeting, the Labour councillors and MP and administration actually said nothing at all when Lister Road went through full council and cabinet. And I did make comment, thank you very much, I did make comment that it would have been probably more appropriate if they had started objecting to this at the very beginning of the process, which was well over 12 months ago. I did find it also slightly amusing the other day, in view of your comments and the involvement of your MP, Ian Austin, that I got a letter from him the other day asking if we could move more council buildings or more council sites into Lister Road. I did respond that the week before he was saying we wanted less in Lister Road, and then only several weeks ago he was asking me to move more sites into Lister Road. So I think he's a little bit confused there. What I would say is we are continuing to liaise with planners and take on board any feedback in relation to the proposals and make changes where appropriate. We are hoping to put forward some consultation. Hopefully we're going to make some decisions in the new year, but currently we are still working with everyone concerned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No other speakers, so I'll call on Councillor Harley to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Shakespeare's get a good account. There wasn't a murmur, not one murmur about these proposals prior to May this year. Not one murmur. I think Councillor Shakespeare's, I think Councillor Harley put you in your place. I will take exception, though, to part of what you said previously about that the leader and the cabinet member had misled you. I've had no personal conversation with you about this issue at all. My office is always open. You're free to come and knock the door and walk in, and we can talk further. But it is wrong for you to say that myself and the cabinet member have misled you on this, because we haven't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All agreed? That's carried. The West Midlands Fire Service Governance. I call on the leader.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the report and recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Is there a seconder?
Formally seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Aston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The governance review and scheme outlined in the report on page 8 of the Yellow Book signals the biggest change in the governance of our fire service since the mid-1980s. The proposed change in the way we govern the fire service has been brought about by the Policing and Crime Act, which provides the opportunity for the Police and Crime Commissioners to effectively mount a hostile takeover of fire and rescue services. After much deliberation, it is the cross-party view of the current West Midlands Fire Authority that this must not happen here in the West Midlands. The Police Commissioner must not be able to take over the fire service. If governance must change, its future lies within West Midlands Combined Authority and the Office of the Mayor. It's incumbent upon me as a member of the current Fire and Rescue Authority to seek a number of assurances from the Leader of the Council that he will do everything he can to ensure mayoral governance of the fire service is fit for purpose as we move towards the public consultation stage of the proposed change. And I would ask him to endorse 3 red line areas. Firstly, there must be ring fencing of future core funding and precept income, as well as fire service reserves, essential for protecting the fire service budget. We must not see fire service money diverted into other West Midlands Combined Authority activities. Secondly, there should be the establishment of a mayoral fire advisory committee drawn from each of the 7 local authorities in the West Midlands to maintain a direct link into this chamber. And thirdly, the Chief Fire Officer alone must maintain full accountability for operational functions of the fire service. Over the past 7 years, West Midlands Fire Service has lost 50% of its revenue support grant. And yet, and without any reference to a certain Facebook video, should this building be on fire, we could expect a fire service response on average within 4 minutes and 41 seconds. We have a world-class fire service, Mr. Mayor, and we must collectively ensure this change in its governance structure does nothing to damage that. Thank you.
Councillor Brothwood.
With regards to this progression of the combined authority, we have to say we did tell you this was coming. So I share the concerns of Councillor Aston You know, we've seen the mayor grab more and more powers. We were told originally back in 2015 there wouldn't be a mayor. It's not going to cost you any more. Now we're seeing the combined authority grow. We now have an elected mayor, and they're going to take control of the police, and they're going to take control of the fire service. And if you look later on in the papers, if you look at the debt that we'll have by 2021, some 750 million, I think this is a step too far.
Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually standing up to support Councillor Aston's comments, and certainly I'm sure that the leader will agree that the three points that were raised in terms of ring fencing of the funding and of the committee, and also that the Chief Fire Officer retains his autonomy from this, have to be pursued. Certainly, as Councillor Aston has alluded to, that it's a cross-party support for the elected mayor to take on this role, which we very much welcome in terms of progression, and also I feel that the Fire Authority in its new format will retain that independence, but certainly I would echo what Councillor Aston has already said. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Very much, Mr. Mayor. It's going to be a really brief contribution, but I think I must get up just to point out the contribution that Paul Brothwood, the UKIP leader, made, just so that there's no confusion from what Councillor Aston actually put forward. And now I recognise that within certain elements of UKIP that you can't see the wood for the trees, and there's all these. But the point that was being made was with regard to the transferring of the powers to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Now, how we can move from the Police and Crime Commissioner to then go on a rant around the West Midlands Combined Authority, I think demonstrates the lack of knowledge, or I'm not sure whether it's implied or deliberate. This whole thing about everything that the West Midlands Combined Authority says is necessarily wrong, and we will make that point. The issue that's been raised is reassurances that if, following consultation, we find that changes need to be made, that the very essential protections for the Fire Authority is maintained. Cross-party support. I don't think there's any of us within this chamber that would actually disagree with the comments that are being made, no matter how much you may wish to muddy the water.
No further speakers? Councillor Harley to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reference Councillor Barlow and Councillor Adam Aston. If you email me those 3 points that you've raised, we're in a meeting on Friday with the other 6 Met leaders, and I'm sure their members are also raising those same concerns with them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is that all agreed? That is carried. The annual review of the Constitution. I call on the leader.
Mr. Mayor, I might like to take the unusual step of withdrawing this report. It's gone to Cabinet. There's quite a lengthy report. There's a lot of detail in there, but I would like this report to go to the relevant scrutiny committee, the corporate scrutiny committee, for further full scrutiny and deliberation, and then returning to the next council meeting. Having checked with officers, it doesn't cause us any major issues, so I think in the timetable of the municipal year, this can still be fitted in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder first? Does anyone wish to speak on that? Is that comment carried? All agree. Medium-term financial strategy. I call on Councillor Steve Clark. Councillor Harley's just withdrawn an agenda item, right, so there's no issue there. Right, the next agenda item, medium-term financial strategy. I call on Councillor Steve Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the report and the recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Is there a seconder?
Formally seconded, Mr Mayor.
There are no indications for any debate. Councillor Steve Clark to reply officially.
John Martin's just pressed his button there, but he hadn't pressed it.
Can I just say, we must be quicker off the mark with buttons I think we're hearing about. Councillor John Martin, I'll allow this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the spirit of Christmas, I'm very grateful. Mr Mayor, really this is just a clarification concerning page 88, paragraph 21 of the Yellow Book. This, which concerns a recommendation in the report of the Cabinet. I think that's very important to remember. It's a recommendation in the report of the Cabinet. Earlier in the year, as the paragraph suggests, a resolution was put forward. In fact, it was an amendment to Councillor Clark's budget motion concerning the way the Council goes about procurement. And in the amendment that was subsequently passed and proposed by Councillor Brothwood and Councillor Perks, Dean Perks, there was a very clear resolution and direction, and that was that the Chief Executive be instructed to source a private company that would be targeted to deliver savings of 5% from procurement over the next 3 years and would be paid by results. The wording was quite specific. Indeed, on the night, members from this side of the chamber did advise caution and did approach the UKIP group to try and agree a better form of wording because we knew this might be problematic. I personally don't have a problem with the wording in paragraph 88. Page 88, paragraph 21, because that's the way that this side of the chamber advised the full council to proceed on the night of the budget meeting. However, this, I suppose, really is more akin to a procedural point of order in that we need clarification around the constitutional status of the recommendation at paragraph 21 in tonight's Yellow Book on page 88. The motion at the budget meeting was quite clear. The Chief Executive be instructed, and that was passed by elected members in this chamber. It appears in the Yellow Book that that has not been the case, and for understandable reasons, no doubt. However, elected members passed a motion at full council at its budget meeting. It did not ask the Chief Executive to undertake a review. It did not ask the Chief Executive to try her best. It instructed the Chief Executive to source a private company. And I would like to know from the leader and from the Chief Executive and from any legal officer that we may have present here tonight to advise both the Chief Executive and elected members what is the constitutional status of the budget motion that was passed on the 6th of March in this chamber by elected members. Because quite frankly, Mr Mayor, I don't believe that paragraph 21, a recommendation, should be allowed to overturn a budget motion without further clarification on its constitutional basis. Does it require a further motion in this chamber to amend, to rescind, to overturn the budget motion passed on the 6th of March? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Les Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to agree with Councillor Martin to a large extent because I got up at the time and made the point that I thought that the wording of that particular amendment was too prescriptive and that it doesn't allow any flexibility for circumstances where we can't follow it through. And I absolutely agree with that. However, this council is the sovereign body and we are tonight considering a report where the proposal in the medium-term financial strategy, which actually, bearing in mind we're coming to the point of a new budget review, a new budget in any case, I would think it's perfectly reasonable that we have to act in order to enact our budget in any way necessary to get a result. I think this is a right step. This was how the original motion should have been worded, unquestionably. I think it was a little bit of overexcitement by the UKIP members that they wanted to assert that authority on the Chief Executive. But the reality is we have to be adaptable to circumstances. This is an adaptation which I think is utterly the right thing to do in these circumstances. And I certainly think it's worth raising the point. And I understand the point about the Constitution, but I can't see that we as the sovereign body can't change our mind. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Pete Lowe.
Again, to be brief, I'm going to agree with Councillor Jones, agreeing with Councillor Martin, but make a couple of points. And I welcome the fact that the previous motion on the Constitution has gone back for further scrutiny, because I think what we need to do is review it as part of that. If I can simplify a complex process, and many of us will remember that fateful evening in March, and you're quite right, a number of us did get slightly excited. And I'll read the amended wording, because I think that is important. The amendment by Councillor Martin was that the Chief Executive be instructed to deliver savings of 5% by procurement over the next 3 years. That's a motion that actually, when we look at paragraph 21, is in effect, and I think Councillor Jones made the point, quite appropriately being delivered. But the dichotomy is that that motion was lost in a full council chamber meeting. So technically, and the reason in order to be useful, if you look at the Constitution, it's very clear, and it states you cannot apply a motion that has been lost for a period of 6 months. Well, in effect, what the ruling group, for understandable reasons, and it's not trying to be party political, but I think we need to tidy it up, because of the ability to abide by the motion that was passed, common sense has prevailed, and paragraph 21 has actually been applied. But if we wanted to be totally bureaucratic, we should actually say that paragraph 21 is being applied despite full council voting against its contents. And that is what I think we need to look at, which is why, in some ways, I think it's quite fortuitous that we send in the Constitution back for further scrutiny so we can tie up that potential loophole to ensure that that doesn't happen in the future.
Councillor Steve Clark to reply.
I think what we've done is common sense needs to take place. We will get the legalities checked of that, and I think we just need to move on with it now. What we have done is we examined the possibility of going out to outside bodies. That was too expensive for us to carry out. We formed a cross-party panel to get the procurement looked at. We've gone down the route this afternoon of finding out what the consultant that's looking after the procurement, what she's found out so far. And I think generally we've done that correctly, but I will find out the legal structures and I'll let you know on that one. Thank you.
Is that agreed? That is carried. The review of housing finance, I call on Councillor Laura Taylor.
Mr Mayor, members of the Council, I move that the report and recommendations of the Cabinet be approved and adopted.
Is there a seconder?
Formally seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There are no indications to speak. Councillor Laura Taylor, officially to respond. That is carried. Membership of committees. Membership of committees 2017-2018, I'll call on the leader.
Members of the Council, I move that 1. The Council notes the filling of the following vacancies on committees. Councillor Matt Rogers has been appointed to the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Les Jones has been appointed to the Children's Services Scrutiny Committee. And Councillor Mike Atwood has been appointed to the Appeals Committee. And furthermore, Mr Mayor, Councillor Ruth Buttery be elected to serve as Chair of the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, that Luke Johnson be elected to serve as Vice Chair of the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, and finally, Mr Mayor, that Councillor Mike Atwood be elected to serve as Vice Chair of the Appeals Committee. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder? There are no indications to speak. I call upon the leader to reply officially. Is that all agreed? That is carried. Agenda item 7, West Midlands Combined Authority borrowing powers and amendments to the Key Route Network. The West Midlands Combined Authority borrowing powers and amendments to the Key Route Network. I call on the leader.
Members of the Council, I move that the revised recommendations as shown on the sheet circulated around the Council chamber be approved and adopted. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder? There are no indications to speak. Councillor Harley to reply. That is carried. Notices of motion. Councillor Peatlow.
The notion of notice of motion, I'd just like to raise a point of order under section 14.12 and just really seek Council's clarification. Members will recollect at the previous meeting on Monday the 9th of October, but more importantly the actions on Tuesday the 10th of October, where there was quite a little bit of interest with regard to the goings on Monday the 9th, and an awful lot of anger about the inability to discuss a motion on trees. And my concern is that we come here this evening and we don't have that really important motion on trees. And just to put this, and I won't take too much of your time, Mr Mayor, but just to contextualise this, with regard to the transcript of the video by Councillor Bill Etheridge, who I note was going to pack the Council chamber and show you a pretty awful time this evening, Mr Mayor. It's really interesting to note Bill's absence, although no doubt the meeting in Lee is going extremely well for the Indigo group. But the issue with regard to trees was, and I'll quote directly, we put forward a motion calling on the review to try and get more money for tree maintenance. People's properties have been benighted by this. Literally, there's parts of Dudley that are like a forest. There's sap falling into people's cars, and people are having a living hell. My simple question, it was so important at the last meeting to have this discussion. Ourselves in the group we're looking forward so that we can debate this really important issue. Am I absolutely correct, Mr Mayor, that the mover of the motion, UKIP councillor, is that important that he's withdrawn or deferred it?
Thank you for raising the point under 14.12. It's my understanding that under Constitution, point 12.2, that a mover can, if they submit in writing, either defer or withdraw a motion. I understand that is exactly what's happened. Thank you. Notices of motion. At this point, can I remind members that under Council Procedure Rule 12.5, the maximum time to be allowed to deal with all notices of motion is 30 minutes. If the notice of motion is not dealt with within this period, it will be referred to the next ordinary meeting of the Council. I now call on Councillor Paul Brothwood to move the motion in his name as set out in the agenda.
For some time, in fact since we were elected in 2014, we've campaigned for free parking across the borough. We recognise the budgetary restraints, and so our initial position of trying to introduce free parking completely across the borough was not politically acceptable. So we accepted that. So we were very pleased when the trial started some time ago to introduce 2 hours of free parking, and what some fantastic results we've seen. The business people of Halzowen have done their own research. As the research that was done by the council, they placed a camera on top near HSBC Bank, just by the Cornbow Centre. Unfortunately, the camera was obscured by a van part of the time and only looked at a very small section of the street to measure footfall. So what the businesses did, 50 businesses in Halzowen got together and they did their own survey of the impact of this 2 hours of free parking. And this is just 3 statements from the survey. 50% agreed that footfall had increased by 25%. 30% agreed that footfall had increased by 25 to 50%, and 20% agreed that footfall had increased between 75 and 100%. Now, that is fantastic news for the businesses of Halzowen, but again, I'm sure that has been replicated across the borough, and that's why we've continued to campaign for free parking. I think Merry Hill is a great empirical example of where free parking has worked. It's a catalyst. It's not the solution, but it certainly is a catalyst for local business, and they've had a hard enough time during these, well, really since 2008, as many residents have as well. And so with the budgetary pressures as they are at the present, seems to have reduced. We're not in the states that we were 18 months ago, where things were a lot more difficult. We would like to see, just as the trial did the 2 hours parking, we would like the current free 1 hour of parking extended back to the 2 where the trial was done, and that seemed to work both in Dudley, Halzowen and further afield. And so, following the amendment, using section 14.7 of the alteration of motions, I'm happy to accept the slight amendment to the following. Following the successful trial of the 2 hour parking in Dudley Borough, the current policy of 1 hour free parking be extended to 2, subject to the availability of budgetary resources. Thank you.
Is that seconded? This is the amended motion now. So is that seconded? We're now speaking to the amended motion. Councillor Les Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really by way of a query, because reading this amendment, it says the current policy of 1 hour free parking. I understand that the 1 hour free parking is actually still a trial, even though it's been extended to a larger number of car parks. So to adopt this would actually be putting into policy 1 hour free parking, which we haven't yet done as a council. I think that needs to be struck so that we can actually... I mean, I've got no issue with the rest of the proposal, but I think the word, the current policy has to be changed to the current trial.
Yeah, so this is an amendment to the amendment.
Well, I'm not proposing an amendment. I'm simply
I understand the
pointing
point.
out there's a fundamental error in the wording of the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
So is the mover of the motion happy with that? Right, we'll get there eventually. Councillor Harley.
Yes, very important that we get this right. It is still a trial, but we could stand up here all night and deliberate between the two groups whose idea this was for free car parking in Dudley. The fact is, well, I doubt it, because as when Councillor Jones was leader of the council, we had talks about scrapping car parking charges from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. at a cost of 30k to the authority. Unfortunately, we lost control a few months later in May, so we never got the chance to put that plan into implementation. So we can go back at least 4 or 5 years, a couple of years before there were any UKIP members on this authority, where we were extolling the virtues of providing some free car parking in this borough to give our retailers a boost. Now, where we've had the 2 hour trial, admittedly only on a few car parks scattered around the borough, it has been successful. You talk to the traders in Dudley, it gives them a degree of confidence, and we have to continue in that vein by giving retailers the confidence, and not just the retailers here now, but give retailers the confidence outside the borough to come here, to take that risk in setting up a business. And it's a small measure, but it's a measure that just just gives our local economy that boost that it needs. Now, as I've said, we, myself and Councillor Brothwood, could stand up all night trying to claim who started this first. That's not the key question here. The key question is, should the Labour group ever get their hands on the levers of power, would they take away the free parking that this authority has now given to the people of Dudley? That's the big question that needs to be asked of the opposition.
We'll see. And on that point, Councillor John Martin.
Yes, I think yet again the UKIP group and the controlling Conservative group always have a problem with getting the motion right on the night, don't they? We've seen it at the budget meeting and we've seen it here again tonight. Clearly, UKIP and the Conservatives feel comfortable in proposing this motion because the finances of the council are in an improving situation following 5 years of sound financial management by this side of the chamber. Sound financial management which we look forward to continuing after the local elections in May. But, Mr Mayor, in terms of this motion, all I would ask the mover, the original mover of the motion, to clarify, if he could, is the timescale. The timescale within which he wants to see this 2-hour free parking introduced, extended, become the current policy of this authority. What timescale are we talking about? Because unless we have a timescale, a meaningful timescale, this motion is nonsense. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bills.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm really upset, actually, that we're not talking about trees, because I've written a fantastic speech, you know, root and branch, you know, I got it all in there, and now we're talking about parking. And what's gone on with this parking? I mean, I was going to introduce that as a pantomime. I mean, we started off with a good story, didn't we, 12 months ago? I wasn't here, unfortunately. I was still in hospital, but I wasn't upset about it. The Labour cabinet took it. We said, well, not just those areas. Where can you not park, even if you want to park? And we all know that's Brierley Hill. So we put Brierley Hill into the mix. We had the trial. We had the extended trial. Great. I thought it was wonderful. I know where your details have come from. Some of us are actually actually have the actual results, do we not, Councillor Shakespeare? So those will be coming out soon. But I have to say that it seems to have gone from a good story with a wonderful idea of Baron Hardup suddenly realising he ought to do good to everybody, to a farce. A really good Whitehall farce, because going 1 hour free across the borough, haven't got a problem with that. Brilliant idea. We already have it. It's called on-street parking. This party put more free on-street parking on the roads than we've ever had before. But there it is. And then you go into Hales Owen to pay. There was still a banner from your source of those figures saying 2 hours free parking, and some poor souls got caught up in that and found themselves with a fine because it had gone to 1. But when you read it, and I park in Hales Owen on a regular basis, unless I'm using my bus pass, of course, I have to say it's a farce, because you get 1 hour free. But if you are a loyal customer who shops in Hales Owen or in any of the other towns, you don't have 1 hour free and pay for the second hour. You have to pay for both hours. And that is a farce. And I can tell you now, the answer is, if the Labour Party gets in control next year, we will make sure that if it's 1 hour free, it will be 1 hour free. And you won't penalise those people who've put their faith back in the town centres, come to shop, and they stand there and they think, I'm paying for 2 hours. This is a farce. I will support this. I like it. I like the 2 hours. It did bring people back into the town. But if we're going, if we're going to do this, it will be done properly. and everyone will understand what they're doing when they get there at that machine. And if it's 1 hour free, if it comes to 2 hours, it'll be 1 hour free, and the second hour you pay for. We'll get rid of the farce that so many of us have to put up with when we go shopping. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bills. And I am relieved you didn't mention Dick Whittington in all those pantomimes. Councillor Heather Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I personally feel that the way the 1 hour free parking has been rolled out in the borough is discriminatory. Only people who park for 1 hour and are able to leave before the hour is up can benefit. Anyone like myself who parks for 2 hours or 3 hours does not benefit at all. We have to pay for each of the hours. Our charges have not been reduced to give us 1 hour free parking. For instance, 1 hour is free. 2 hours should be 1 hour free and pay 70p. 3 hours should be 1 hour free and pay £1.40. The public are pressing the button on the machines at the Royal Market car park, Stourbridge, and getting a free ticket for 1 hour, then returning to do the same for another hour. The old machines do not register the car registration number. When parking at a hospital, however, everyone gets the benefit of a period of free parking, whether it be a quarter of an hour, half an hour or an hour, depending on the hospital. Charges start after that initial free period for all, which is what this council should be doing. Could this be reviewed, please? Now, in relation to the motion, if the notice of motion is carried, it too may be discriminatory. Parking for 2 hours free is moved. But will those parking for 3 hours have to pay for each hour as they do now, or will they be given 2 hours free and pay for just 1 hour? Could this also be clarified, please? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Shakespeare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Bills, I think the farce is yours because you actually introduced the structure of the free parking. So the second hour, you pay for 2 hours, and that's exactly what you introduced and you signed off earlier this year. The only thing that I have done is extended the 2 hour free parking from July to September under the same structure that you signed off and agreed earlier this year. You are the farce because I can't believe that you are actually now saying what you're saying. We extended the trial again, so it went right across the borough for 1 hour. I suppose if it was left up to Labour, because they opposed free parking, we would never have had this trial had this council not voted for it. So we did that earlier this year. It's true that Halesowen, the results that have come out, which are available at the moment from the 2 hour free trial, Halesowen was successful. Regardless of where the camera is, they did have the best results for the 2 hour trial. I think the amendment says it all, and when funds are available, I'm sure we will continue to put forward our free parking for the people of the Dudley Borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, members of the council. We're just checking on the amended wording so that we can get it absolutely right. I have. Following the successful trial of the 2 hour free parking in Dudley Borough and the current trial of 1 hour free parking, that trial be extended to 2, subject to the availability of budgetary resources. This to be implemented.
I think I'll be just leave that bit out.
Yeah, forget the last bit. Right. Right. So we got writing all over the place here. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Following the successful trial, it's all right, I got notes all over the place. Following the successful trial of the 2 hour free parking in Dudley Borough and the current trial of 1 hour free parking, that trial be extended to 2, subject to the availability of budgetary resources.
Yeah. That'd be all right. Okay. So that's what we're voting on. That's what
So that is the amended motion that we'll be voting on. Is everyone clear on that?
We're saying that the current 1 hour trial in all car parks across the borough will potentially be extended to all car parks across the borough for 2 hours, subject to the availability of resources. Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, but that sounds like a con. That's not going to happen. The money's not available. This is all smoke and mirrors.
We've got to get this finished tonight, and we're fast approaching in 30 minutes, so all right. Yes? I'll call upon Councillor Brothwood to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, with regards to the timescale, I mean, I think the key thing to say is just as soon as fiscally possible with regards to the budget. So I'm sure the 3 group leaders, myself, Pete and Patrick, can meet as soon as possible to ensure this can be implemented in the coming weeks, assuming that it's legal and it's financially possible to do. I think that's the most important thing, and the budget makes and the motion makes that very clear. I think, sadly, the Labour Party are trying to make something positive into a negative. It's typical Corbyn politics, divisive. However, let's get this forward. This is a really positive move for local businesses, and I hope that you all vote for it. Thank you.
We will now put the amended motion to the vote. Is there a need for a vote?
Agreed.
The vote? Agreed? Agreed? Aye. That is carried. Questions under Council Procedure Rule 11. I call upon members to indicate whether they wish to ask any questions in relation to the minutes and delegated decision summaries. I will take questions in the order in the matters that appear in the list. I will deal with one question at a time, and that is the question and answer to it, before moving on to the next question and so on. Can I remind members that the purpose of Council Procedure Rule 11 is to allow questions. Members will have the chance to speak on individual questions. However, any comments made should remain relevant to the question that is under consideration. Children's Services Scrutiny Committee dated 28th of September and the 15th of November. None. Corporate Scrutiny Committee dated 26th of September and the 14th of November. Health and Social and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee dated 27th of September. None. Place Scrutiny Committee dated 16th of November 2017. Councillor Cottrell.
Mr. Mayor, I want to speak on, it's page 32, and it's right at the top of the page concerning 20 mile an hour to schools. Alan's just said it, what a waste of time. I raised this at the community forum meeting some time ago, the speeding on Quadderbank High Street. And I was told then there is enough signage to tell motorists what speed they've got to travel at. Yes, on the road there is. And who takes any notice of it? Nobody. And reading this minute here, does anybody in this chamber really think the police have the resources to monitor this and to issue tickets for anybody speeding in schools? In any case, that is why the traders who see it every day on Quadderbank High Street, I've organised a petition of which I'll be giving to Alan Lunt later on this evening to ask for 2 illuminated signs to show the speed they should be travelling at the top of Quadderbank High Street and at the bottom. Now, just one little illustration, just to prove the point what I'm making here. I could name one too, but an elderly gentleman that I know, he was on 2 sticks going into the butcher's, and I thought he'd had a hip replacement. And he said, oh no, he said, I parked my car here in front of Tony's and I was getting out and a car came by at such a speed it forced the door back onto my legs. Yes, and I've been going to the hospital ever since with 2 bad legs, and that was speeding on Quarterbank High Street. So really I'm asking, the police are not going to monitor this because they've not got the resources, so let's have prevention before anything really happens. So I'll be giving Alan Lunt this petition later this evening. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bill, same subject? No. Right. Councillor Partridge, same subject? No. Councillor Crumpton, same subject? Yes. Thank you.
Two schools at the moment that I'm involved in, Hob Green School in Walderscote area and Cradley, well actually 3 schools, Cradley CV Primary School and Collie Lane Primary School over in Cradley. I'll pick those 2 first. We do have a petition run at the moment by a local resident who's got a mobility scooter. Finds it very difficult to get around up there and it's also being supported by a woman that runs in the Providence Methodist Church an active session for elderly people. The reason she's doing it is that she was knocked down just outside the Potters in Collie Lane, people that know that area, earlier this year. The lady in the wheelchair has had a number of near misses. Collie Lane is an extremely dangerous road. Anybody that knows the area knows that we have a huge amount of traffic up there. It's a bus route, and we've got almost 1,000 school children that go to the 2 schools along that road, or just off that road. It's chaotic every morning. Now, the reason that I'm pleased that Councillor Cottrell's brought this up is that I remember, and I think the person was sitting about where Councillor Kettle sat a number of years ago, and I think it was Adrian Turner, stood up in this chamber and passed a motion, people will remember, saying that we should have reduced speed limits around all of our schools. I remember it really well, because one of the councillors on his side said, well, we can't do anything about the Thorns, and we can't do anything about the Grange. It was Les Jones, I think. Yes, it was Les Jones who said this. We can't do anything about those. We could never reduce those below 40 miles an hour. Well, we have. And we actually reduced speed along those roads as well. Councillor Cottrell makes a good point that the police can't enforce these speed limits. But actually, I truly believe that if you put up a speed limit sign that says 20 miles an hour next to our schools, and you have, as they have in a number of other local authorities around the country and around this area, big flashing yellow lights that say it's a school, slow down, right? You actually do get people to slow down. In Hob Green School, we had, thankfully, not as bad an accident as it first turned out, it first looked to be. We had the area ambulance come down and park on the school site, really exciting for the kids, but actually really essential because the little girl had just run out in front of her own car into the path of a young lady driving her car, and sadly she was very heavily pregnant at the time and really upset about what had happened, and we thought the child was very badly hurt. Luckily she wasn't. But we've got a very difficult junction there, again a bus route, but no 20-mile-an-hour zone around it. My question is not about what can the police do about this, not about the enforcement of tickets, but when are we going to get the 20-mile-an-hour zones around all of our schools, and actually I think even slower than that in some areas, that you, as a party, proposed in this chamber, that we did move along when we were in power, not as quickly as we should have done, but it doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. I was under the impression that the whole of the area around Cradley, CFE and Collie Lane Primary School was a 20-mile-an-hour zone. Actually, it isn't. It's only the road between Homer Hill Park entrance and the school that is the 20-mile-an-hour zone. It takes no doing to do any of this, so can we actually get along and do it? Because every councillor in this chamber has got the same problem, haven't we? Of speeding and a lot of traffic and parking around schools, where a reduced speed limit would make an awful lot of difference to our children's safety, and there is absolutely no reason why we can't do it. Can we put a timescale on it? Can we look at all those schools that haven't got a 20-mile-an-hour zone at the moment? It wouldn't take an awful lot of doing, would it? And find out exactly how we put those things in. Well, it may not seem to do something, but
Councillor Crumpton.
All I can say, Mr Mayor, is where we've got that reduced speed limit down the Thorns, where it shouldn't ever have been able to happen, it does slow people down. I use that road almost every day. In fact, nearly every day between my house and my mum's. And you notice that drop in the speed limit has gone down significantly. As of the speed bumps which you've had in the area just around Odd Green School, the speed's dropped. So for goodness sake, let's get it done and get it done quickly, please.
Thank you. Can I just remind members that these are supposed to be just questions, please? Can we just sort of tighten things up? No, it's not debate, it's just questions, please. Councillor Sparks, was yours on the same issue?
Yes. My understanding, and Councillor Jones is the expert on this, my understanding is when it comes to a question, it then becomes open to the debate. And the reason why I'm getting up is not to contradict what my two colleagues have said, but to refine, shall we say, what they have said. First of all, in relation to Thorns Road, unfortunately, Councillor Crumpton, it's not the case that the problem's gone away. As one who lives next to Thorns Road, the fact of the matter is you've still got people going down that road at 70, 80 mile an hour, all kinds of vehicles. It's just ridiculous. What's needed on Thorns Road is for the camera in the for the speed cameras to actually be operating, or for the police to come and do it. With all due respect to Councillor Cottrell, the fact of the matter is we have a crisis in this country in relation to the police. The police cannot continually say we haven't got the resources because we're on the edge, and there are more than one ex-policeman here, we're on the edge of the public saying, well, what do we have the police for if they are saying we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do the other? And that ultimately is a question for the Home Secretary. When we come to the High Street in Quarrybank, what's needed here is the flashing lights. But as a motorist, if you have a 20 mile an hour zone, when, you know, at the middle of the night, you don't need to go at 20 mile an hour, then the zone itself loses credibility. And where we made the mistake, and it was us, was where we put in signs which were fixed 20 mile an hour zones 24/7. Whereas you go to other authorities where you've got 20 mile an hour zones next to school, and I can list them off, where it's flashing lights during school hours, it's observed, and then it's a sensible situation, everybody gains. And what we have to do in this council chamber is learn from our experience and listen to the people out there, and end up that when we put something in, it's actually an improvement on what was there before. Because the reality is we have consistently put measures in that haven't always been an improvement.
I've suddenly got three members who wish to speak, and I suspect it's the same issue. Councillors Brothwood, Shakespeare and Jones in that order. Do you wish to speak on this subject? Councillor Brothwood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very quickly, I was just wondering how long the backlog is since the previous administration with regards to the Safer Route to Schools programme. This is a programme that's been running for many years, which provides funding available for 20 mile an hour limits, speed humps, etc. I mean, both myself and Councillor Lewis have been trying for years to make improvements around Worsley with regards to this funding, but I believe there's a backlog of 3 or 4 years. So it'd be interesting to have an update of how many requests are on this Safer Route to Schools programme and what can be done to speed things up.
Councillor Shakespeare, same issue.
Just a comment that there is a programme already in place, and the Safer Routes to School is being rolled out right across the borough. I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Sparks, and I'm sure Councillor Jones is going to make a comment in a minute. The 20 mile an hour must be meaningful. Thorns Road is a classic example. We were pushing for it to be left at 40 and then for 20 mile an hour for opening and closing times for the school, because then if you're a motorist, you know that that is actually when you really need to slow down. What happened is it was reduced to 30 miles an hour, and then everybody just drives over the speed limit. And they don't really take a blind bit of notice that it's opening and closing time for the school. I've just had a Safer Routes to School, a new one, to sign off on a main road, where again, the officers have put forward to reduce it to 30 miles an hour, and then a 20-mile-an-hour zone. It's absolutely meaningless. Leave it at 40. That's the speed that law-abiding motorists travel at on that road. It's a main road. But then make it very visible at opening and closing times for those schools that it's 20. And then we might actually get some motorists who actually take notice of what's happening. I've picked up on flashing lights outside schools, on other roads that are flashing all through the day, really, or weekends or bank holidays and whatever, and that was something I picked up earlier in the year. And again, as I say, it's got to be meaningful, because we don't have the police resources to take, you know, to be there 24/7. So, you know, we've got to do something that really impacts on the motorists and makes them think. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jones, same subject.
It is a reality that all of us in this chamber get people lobbying us to reduce speed limits. We actually live on the edge of a 40-mile-an-hour road where almost every month somebody demands that we reduce the speed limit to 30. It's a perfectly safe, very wide, straight 40-mile-an-hour road with a school on it. It makes no sense whatsoever to reduce the speed limit, because what you do, perversely, is encourage people to break the law. And as a former police officer, you will know that the worst thing you can do is encourage people to encroach on minor infringements of the law, because it does lead to a general disregard of the law. And I think speeding is a perfect example of this. What we need is better enforcement of the rules. Almost every case where people complain about the speed and want it reducing, it simply is because there are people who exceed that limit, as Councillor Sparks said, by ridiculous amounts. I mean, I think Thorns Road, there was one recorded at 120 odd miles an hour down to the island at the Bronx. I mean, that is absolutely crazy, but people will do it. With proper enforcement, you've got a chance of controlling that. Then the demand for reduced speed limits is reduced. I'm a great advocate for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits outside schools. I'd be an advocate for the American system, where you have a bus with a red light on and you dare not overtake it, because the copper will stick his gun up your nose if you dare to overtake a school bus. I think our children should be protected at any cost. But the way to do that is by having variable speed limits for set periods of time. Almost everyone I can think of who is a responsible, civilised human being will want to abide by that rule. Our officers seem to say we can only do fixed 20-mile-an-hour limits because it's complicated. As others have said, all over the country, authorities are doing it. And I don't see why we should be any different. We as a council should, at the earliest opportunity, resolve to make this happen outside every school and make it compulsory, and let's find the money. Because let's be honest, we talk a lot about what a priority is, but protecting our children in an age where the motor car is growing in its importance to everyone and in volume and therefore risk, we should be doing something about it instead of having this same debate. I remember standing up when I was in that seat down there as leader of the council saying we have resolved as a council to do this, and this is now 5-6 years on and we still aren't doing it. We should do it now.
Councillor Bills, you indicated earlier on to speak. Do you still wish to speak on this or another subject?
One sentence on this and then I have a new subject.
Now, you're allowed to speak once. Can you try and...
Okay, well, I'll wait till we...
Okay. Councillor Partridge.
Don't speak on this subject.
Okay. Councillor Bills first, then.
Be very naughty. I thought when I was the Cabinet member and Councillor Shakespeare agreed with me that we were going to have no 20-mile-an-hour around schools that were not 24/7 and they had flashing lights. I thought that's what we had agreed. So I'm on your side. Let's get it done. What I want to talk about is the third resolve from the place scrutiny on page 32. Page 32. I mean, I feel for you, Councillor Rogers, being the chair of this, at the time when you're having to talk about school crossing patrols. I feel your pain. I have been there, and I know what you're going through. It's not an easy decision to make when you have a non-statutory duty and you haven't got the money to keep a service running. Therefore, you have still got to make decisions. When I was a Cabinet member, I tried passionately to make sure it became part of healthy living and walking. There are systems in other authorities, I talked about it then, where you persuade parents to park away from the school and encourage the children to walk. And they are iconic. Crossing patrols are iconic, and I understand. And I know, I'm sorry I couldn't make the meeting, but I see that you resolved on the subject of school crossing patrols to go to a working group. And, you know, on our side, we got a lot of complaints. We did U-turns. No, we never did a U-turn. We did everything in the public domain.
If you've got a question, please.
Yes, I'm coming to it now.
Now, please.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind.
So what
I'm
saying to you, please, I'm hoping that you will change your mind, and I hope that that changes from being a working party to an open meeting where the community can come and join in the discussion. Else you'll have people saying, this is a put-up job, you decided it, and now you've come to us. So I'm asking you, my question is, will you remove 3? Or at least discuss it.
Councillor Partridge.
Pages, well, actually, it's just one page, page 29, paragraphs 4 and 5. And I'm starting to ask a number of questions of the Chair of the Scrutiny Committee. And Mr Mayor, I think you'd probably be interested to note that it's about 7. My first question is to ask if the Chair recalls November's scrutiny meeting, when the committee was asked to record wide-ranging and long-standing community concerns, concerns known to officials but not responded to in the public domain. Can the Chair remember that I went on to read a statement, a copy of which was handed over to the committee clerk, which made reference to the use of jargon and the emergence of a deeply disturbing dark underbelly in Dudley, which is actually worse than anything that we have ever known before. If he can remember that, then he will understand why I'm going to ask the next 2 questions. There is no reference on the official record to the term technical jargon, which was linked to the words emerging communities. This is important because reporting concerns on modern-day slavery, violence, and work exploitation mean that people would not ring in and say that they wanted to talk about concerns for emerging communities. They would be more likely to mention the name of an ethnic group, or perhaps to speak in terms of victims rather than reporting concerns in the language of the technocrat. Council, strictly speaking, we are talking about victims. In this instance, most likely, they are people who have been victims of international crime, individuals who have no ability to act to protect themselves and who have no one to act to protect them. They are most certainly not part of any community. They do not have any acceptable community benefits. For me, very often the people that they're associated with could be assumed to be more enemy than friend. People who have been trafficked, abused, exploited and isolated. But I think I possibly digress here. There is another question to ask in terms of the omission from this record, and that is about the removal of the phrase, the deeply disturbing underbelly of this borough. I accept that it's visceral in nature, and it's tempting to classify this as merely the opinion of one person. But even so, why would you remove it? Criminals who traffic, enslave, abuse and exploit are wholly reliant on a conspiracy of silence. And my next question here has to be, have in Dudley they found the perfect co-conspirators? Members, the Chair of the Scrutiny Committee has the power to establish in no uncertain terms what can and cannot be done by this council. And I would like to now ask him to do that and do it as a matter of urgency. My next 2 questions relate to paragraph 5. If you read the first sentence, it is clear that there is something missing. It may be that the real question is what, but for me tonight, I would like to ask Councillor Rogers if he can make sense of it for himself and for the rest of us. Finally, can he confirm what the subject is going to be of the next report to Cabinet? My understanding from the meeting or should I say my hope was, that it was going to be on landlord licensing. The introduction of which has cross-party support and has been waited for since the beginning of last year. The introduction of landlord licensing will not solve all of the problems that are referenced in these minutes, but it will send out a strong signal that something is being done and that the council is at least trying to get to grips with what is going on.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Rogers to respond, please.
In regard to comments about the school crossing patrol, sorry, I've just had a dentist today and I can hardly talk, so I'll be brief. Comments about the school crossing patrols, thank you to all the councillors about those. Due to the sensitive nature of the issue and the amount of information to digest from the Walking to School report, we have designated a complete working group meeting for this subject in January. This is to give the issue the full amount of time it deserves and to enable members to fully scrutinise the issue and hopefully develop sustainable solutions to forward to Cabinet. Also, with regard to Councillor Partridge, I will check with the clerk who took the minutes. I thought that was full and proper, but I will check with that. Now, I am happy with the work our officers are doing to help with the issues raised by Councillor Partridge. In response, the Chief Officer for Housing has agreed to discuss with West Midlands Police and the local Landlord Association how best to promote the issues. With other positive work, Delegated Decision 20 details our efforts to support the Syrian refugee families with a designated housing officer, funded by government, and we have given extra support to Romanian families in the Lye area. There is also a report being considered by Cabinet for consideration presently on rough sleepers, but we must not confuse this with the number of homeless people in the borough, which is relatively low, about 10, most of whom generally totally refuse help offered by our housing team. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Appeals Committee dated 27th of September and the 1st of November. None. Audit and Standards Committee dated 25th of September 2017. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, yes, I'd like to refer to the minutes of the Audit Committee and ask for a full explanation of the Council's borrowing during the current year. There have been significant long-term loans taken out. I understand we've taken out 3 new long-term loans, totalling over £30 million in the current year alone. We have taken out several short-term loans and a significant loan on one occasion at a value of £1 million to meet cash flow, sorry, £5 million to meet problems with cash flow or to address issues with cash flow problems. So, Mr. Mayor, very important, obviously, the financial position of the Council. Could I ask for a full breakdown of the new long-term borrowings and the reasons for the high level of short-term borrowings that have taken place in this current year? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Brothwood to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Martin, for your questions. I think it would be important possibly for you to take the budgetary training that's offered by Audit and Standards. Yeah, well, I'd suggest you go back to it. With regards to the additional lending that has been taken, the specific figures I can certainly get sent over to you. However, I think it's important to recognise the importance of cash flow for this council. Remember, we have one of the lowest net average borrowing rates in the country, and that's thank you to Ian Newman's work certainly over the last 10 years to make sure we have the lowest, which is a fantastic record. However, going forward, I think it's important to review the cash flow. However, we'll get the specific figures emailed to you. Thank you.
Next is Children's Corporate Parenting Board, dated 10th of October? None. Development Control Committee dated 10th of October and 7th of November? None. Dudley Health and Wellbeing Board dated 21st of September? None. Ernest Stevens Trust Management Committee dated 24th of October? None. Licensing Subcommittee, Subcommittee 2, 26th of September and the 31st of October? None. Taxes Committee dated 12th of October and the 9th of November? None. The Cabinet dated 26th of October? None. The delegated decision summaries involving the following members. Councillor Nicholas Barlow, decision 1. None. Councillor Patrick Harley, decisions 2 and 3. None. Councillor Ian Kettle, decisions 4 to 7. None. Councillor Peter Miller, decision 8. None. Councillor Anne Millward, decisions 9 to 15. None. Councillor Karen Shakespeare, decisions 16 to 18. None. Councillor Laura Taylor, decision 19. Councillor David Vickers, decision 20. I'm reminded by Councillor Melvin Mottram that those members who promised to donate £10 to the Remembrance Bench, if they could see him and donate their funds after the meeting, please. There being no urgent business, so this council meeting is concluded. I would like to take the opportunity to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a peaceful, prosperous New Year. Members and officers are now invited to join me and the Mayoress in the parlour for refreshments.